Hey, Sound Engraver here. Welcome back to another demo in SuperCollider. Today we're going to do some basic synthesis for our audio files. And this was inspired by something I had seen in one of Eli Fieldsteel's tutorials for his class. And I'm happy to provide that in the description below. It's about 2 hours in length, and of course I recommend watching every minute of it. But if you want the exact syntax, I will provide the time mark there where he does start, where he starts to write that syntax. And he uses a sine oscillator for his signal, and he uses, I believe, a Sawtooth Oscillator to manipulate that sine oscillation, that frequency ramping up and down. And I was thinking, well, maybe I can do that with sound files. So I highly recommend referring to his video first before coming to this video, but you'll see the same syntax, except with my signals, it's going to be sound files, so that's going to be great. Without further ado, we'll just go ahead and start that syntax. Now what I have here is my synth.def for my audio files. This is pretty much standard for me now. We're going to tweak it just a little bit, in which we can use a Sawtooth Oscillator to manipulate those sound files. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. I think I've said without further ado twice. It's a habit now, and I might break it. I don't know. And we have another synth.def. I'm going to go ahead and clarify it, calling it play saw for our Sawtooth Oscillator. Now, the key difference between the two synths is that for our sound synthesis, we will not be needing an envelope argument or this envelope line. And that is because we want our sound file to go all the way through in its entire length. So by getting rid of this variable here, we will also get rid of our arguments for that original variable and create a new one. So in this case, we will have a Sawtooth Oscillator, a generator for that, and write it like so. Not LF noise, LFSaw. And there you have it. We have our Sawtooth Oscillator. It's going to need these arguments here, a frequency argument, a phase argument, as well as multiple right here. And for this, we're just going to do frequency. And I'm going to go ahead and set up a new name, a new argument for this frequency. And I will default it to the value 2. And I'm going to give it a range between 2 and 20. And now I'm going to multiply our signal, our sound file, with this Sawtooth Oscillator. And very, very important, I need to scale it with our amplitude value, as you can see here, 0.5. If you don't scale it, as it's been with me in my experience, I didn't have my headphones at the time, but I did see the level meters just spike red way above 0, so it was very frightening looking. So I decided to scale it using the amp, and it's worked since. So let's just check if everything's good here. We are expecting, let's see, oh, semicolon. Ah, yeah, there you go. All right, now let's put the synth.def into a bit of syntax. I meant to say context, but there you have it. Let's move on to the next thing. Well, that was my sound file, and I just realized it does not have a nice release at the end. Oh well, but it's about 10 seconds in length. In fact, I think I can do sound duration. Oh, I think it's more than 10 seconds. I'm going to guess 18 seconds or 22 seconds. Oh, 21.25 seconds. Okay. So it is a long sound file. And I wanted to clarify something that I had not said previously, and that is why we go ahead and get rid of the envelope in this case. We want the whole sound file to run through, in this case, 22 minutes in length. And if we were to have an envelope with an attack and a release, in this case of a 1 second, you would only hear 1 second of the sound file. So that is the reason for getting rid of the envelope in this case. In terms of using sound files for pbind dev and pbind and that kind of pattern structure, that's where you may need an envelope line. So that's what I wanted to say. Now, going into not our play synth def here, that's just for reference, we're going to go ahead and begin running the sound file through our our Sawtooth Oscillator right here. So as you can see, same syntax as we had before, and we'll go ahead and evaluate the synth def and go ahead and play it. All right. So I heard a little bit of that clipping at the very end, and I realized the synth def is not free because we don't have an envelope to have that done action to value to free that synth. So we would need to have a free method there. In this case, our global variable x is used to name this synth, and we would need x.free to free that synth. So we want to be very careful that we do that. Now, you had heard that ramping up before dropping back down and ramping up, that repetitive ramping up, but you may have also heard that awful clippy sound. So let's just go ahead and play it real quick again. And so what's causing that clip? Well, to put this line into perspective, a visual perspective, we'll go ahead and use the plot method to graph this line of syntax. And so right now I have our LFSaw generator using the range of values 2 and 20. So in the course of 1 second, it's going to plot this visual here. And I have 8 being our number of oscillations in, we'll see. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right. So we have 8 full cycles over the span of 1 second. And you can see that it's a linear ramp right here. Just kind of widen it there. You can see it's a linear ramp up to value 20, the highest value that I put in there, and it's a sharp drop down to value 2, the lowest value, and there's no time between that high value and that low value, absolutely no time. And so that's where you're getting that clip sound. It's a very sharp drop before it ramps back up. And between range, which is a linear ramp up, and X range, which is an exponential ramp up, this is the shape difference here. You've got a bit of a slower ramp up, but still an immediate drop down to that lowest value. So that's where you're getting that clipping noise. I believe that's the case. That's my deduction. So perhaps the Sawtooth Oscillator is not the smoothest way we can go about it. So let's go ahead and try some other unit generators. Let's try the triangle wave oscillator here. And much like our arguments for our sawtooth, we have actually the same arguments for our sawtooth. So I'm actually, in this case, just changing names and changing the UGen here. So for this synth def, I'm just doing play try instead of play saw, and using our LFTri UGen, having changed the name of my argument and having changed the name of my variable. Exact same thing. So let's give this a shot. Let's see how this sounds. And of course, I can't forget to free this synth. There we go. Now you can see it being freed in this node tree here. So compared to that sawtooth oscillation, it's much smoother. Let's go ahead and do a visual comparison. So for our sawtooth oscillation, we have pretty much an immediate drop from the high value to the low value. For our triangle wave, we have a ramp down, an actual ramp down from the high value to the low value. And I believe that's the explanation for its smoothness. And if we were to compare our range here, oh, excuse me. Let's see, where were we? If we were to compare our range, our linear ramping up and our ramping back down to our X range, which is exponentially ramping up, we can see a little bit of a change in the shape. I should be a little bit more organized with this. All right, there we go. So a little bit of a kind of a sweeping effect, a slow start before we speed up real fast to the highest value before coming back down. So let's actually hear the difference between just range and X range, those two methods. So this is our range again. And X range. I have to reevaluate this. Oh, see, I forgot to free the first synth. So not only do I need to say x.free, in fact, this is inefficient. See, it only gets rid of the recent synth. So this is going to take a hard command. I don't think it affects anything at this point, but there we go. So always free your synths if you don't have your envelopes. All right, so that was much smoother. I don't know about you, but I definitely heard a slower ramp up to that point, up to that amplitude before ramping back down. So if you were to hear it in from frequencies like 100 hertz to 1,000 hertz, the X range, that exponential value, would stay on the low end before ramping speedily up to the high end there, the high frequency. All right, LFCub is another one. It's a sine-like shape, which does imply smoothness. And let's just go ahead, same syntax, just different names. Let's just go ahead and give it a listen. I hear it being smoother than even the triangle oscillation there. So nice touch. I think that's a very nice touch for sound synthesis. Let's go ahead and see it plotted out here. Yeah, look at that. So we're starting at the value here, and it's a sine oscillation. It's basically a sine oscillation synthesis of our sound file, so very smooth. And this is our linear interpolation here. Just a nice even ramping up and down. For exponential interpolation, a little steeper. You can see again, it's hanging out in the low end a little bit longer than at the high end there. So let's actually hear the difference again. So this is linear with our range method here. I probably should stay at a lower value here so you can kind of hear that kind of ramping of that amplitude there. I believe it's amplitude or something like it. So that was range, and adding X range, we will go ahead and hear it. All right, so yeah, quite smooth there. Now for LFPulse. This is a gnarly one. And actually, before I have you listen, let's just go ahead and take a look at the visuals. So I don't know about you, but that is pretty gnarly, where it's a steep drop. It's an immediate drop from the highest value to the lowest value. And I believe there's a width. There's an extra argument for this one. 0.5, I believe, is the default width. So we've got just a little bit of a crossing before immediately spiking to the high value and so on. So very disjunct, very scary, gnarly looking. And X range, I don't think makes a difference. Not at all. It is straight as board there. So let's go ahead and take a listen, and I'm gonna scale this amplitude down just a little bit. It's not that pleasant, but it won't harm your ears. I want to protect your ears. So I do want to explore this pulse. You know, what's the whole point of it if it has that nasty, gnarly clip? I'm guessing that LFPulse would be very good for something like panning a hard left and right, you know, like a tremolo you would see in a virtual instrument there. So something like that, or maybe an instrument that does not sustain, used for panning. I'm thinking of panning. That's kind of my deduction there. So anyway, it's there to be had and there to be explored. And if I see a very good use for this one, then I'm happy to share that with you. And finally, we're just going to go ahead and add one more smooth one, I believe. Our Parabolic Oscillator. And so again, sign-like shape. Every time you see that phrase, that description, sign-like shape, expect smoothness. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like visually. Yeah, you know, it's beautiful. And it's actually, this starts at 20, the highest value, before going down to 2. And our X range, as we see, just a little bit more ramping down at the lower values here. So let's have a listen. And that was linear using range. And let's go ahead and do X range. All right, so about 5 oscillators out of a huge list of oscillators, and some have great use for this kind of sustaining ambient instrument that you have heard in this demo, and others not so much, but I'm sure they're used for other good purposes. But I wanted you to see for yourself what you can do with a sound file, what you can do with a sine oscillator, and what you can do with a sound file. So go ahead and refer to Eli Fieldstill's video there in the description below. And yes, thank you for watching and listening. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of what to do with some basic sound synthesis procedures. So anyway, always thank you for watching and listening, and be on the lookout for some sound experimentation every Thursday, and I will see you next time.